Hello everyone. Today we're going to report Module 10, Conflict Management and Negotiation. What are the lessons to be learned? Defining and understanding conflict, understanding of the conflict process, learning the concept of negotiation, discussion of the negotiation process.
What is conflict? What is conflict? It is defined as a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. This occurs when one party has a negative effect on the other party's facts and values. Whenever two individuals opine in different ways, a conflict arises. In layman's language, conflict is nothing but a fight either between two individuals or among group members. Conflict arises whenever individuals have different values, opinions, needs, interests, and are unable to find a middle way. Causes of conflict. Within an organization, each individual is different from one another from the physical aspect to the morals and values they uphold. These are the causes of conflict within the organization. First, incompatibility of goals, differences of interpretation of facts, disagreements based on behavioral experiences, poor communication, lack of openness, and lastly, failure to respond to employee needs. There are three views on conflict. First one is traditional of conflict. It is a belief that conflict is dangerous and something that must be avoided. That means that any type of organizational conflict is negative, harmful, and should be avoided. Next is human relations view of conflict. It is a belief that conflict is normal and something that will occur in any group or organization. This also proposes that organizational conflict should be accepted since it is an inevitable part and may improve the performance of a group. For the last for the last one, there is interactionist view of conflict. The belief that conflict is necessary as it brings productivity and a positive force for the group to overcome. This view of conflict also proposes that conflict can be a positive force in a group and explicitly argues that some conflict is necessary for a group to perform effectively. According to interactionist view, conflict can also be functional or dysfunctional. Functional and dysfunctional conflict. Functional conflict. Conflicts that supports the group and creates a positive effect. Dysfunctional conflict. Conflicts that hinders the group, creating a negative atmosphere within the group. This means functional conflict is healthy, constructive disagreement between groups or individuals, and dysfunctional conflict is unhealthy disagreement that occurs between groups or individuals. There are three types of conflict. First one is task conflict. Conflicts that involves the goals and content of the work. This occurs when two parties are unable to move forward on a task due to differing needs, behavior, or attitudes. Next is relationship conflict. Conflicts based on the relationship of a group. And this, this is a conflict resulting from either personality clashes or negative emotional interactions between two or more people. For example, you may have a conflict with your cubemate because you keep a very tidy workspace and his is always messy. Last but not the least is process conflict. Conflict over how work gets done. It it also means the disagreement over the procedure or methods the team or group should use for, for completing its task. It happens when procedure, policies, and strategies clash. The conflict process, as you can see below, as you can see, there are 5 stages in the conflict process. Stage 1 is potential opposition or incompatibility. Stage 2, cognition and personalization. Stage 3, intentions. Stage 4, behavior. And stage 5, outcomes. Stage 1, potential opposition or incompatibility. Communication. Semantic difficulties, misunderstandings, such as noise. The following are the aspects of structure. First, size and specialization of jobs, member incompatibility, leadership style, reward system, dependence, interdependence of groups, and lastly, personal variables and personality types. Stage 2, cognition and personalization. There are 2 types of conflicts in this stage. First one is perceived conflict, and the second one is felt conflict. Perceived conflict. Awareness by one or more parties of the existence of conditions that create opportunities for conflicts to arise. Con- Perceived conflict states that conflict may exist with or without the perception of those involved. For example, there might be situations where people perceive conflict to exist, of, but after speaking, they realized that there was indeed no difference in opinions and in fact no conflict whatsoever. Felt conflict. Emotional involvement in a conflict creating anxiety, hostility, and frustration. For the felt conflict, it is the stage of conflict is also known as the of personalization of conflict, where conflict that is perceived ends up having an impact on the person. Stage 3, intentions. Decisions to act in a given way. Cooperativeness. Attempting to satisfy other parties' concern. Assertiveness. Attempting to satisfy one's own need. The difference between these two is that cooperativeness is you satisfy the other person's concern in a conflict, and and assertiveness, on the other hand, is you satisfy your own concerns in a conflict. Still stage 3, intentions. The following are the 5 conflict handling intentions. First one, competing. A desire to satisfy one's interest. Next is collaborating. A desire to satisfy all parties concerned. The third one is avoiding. A desire to withdraw from a conflict. Fourth, accommodating. The willingness to put the other's concern over his or her own. And lastly, compromising. A situation in which party willing to give up something. Stage 4, behavior. Conflict management. The use of stimulation and resolution of techniques to achieve a desired level of conflict. Management is also the process of limiting the negative aspects of conflict while increasing the positive aspects of conflict. The aim of conflict management is to enhance learning and group outcomes, including effectiveness or performance in an organizational setting. Conflict management techniques. These are some of the are some of the best conflict resolution techniques. First is problem solving, smoothing, authoritative command, compromise, expansion of resources, altering the human variables, altering the structural variables, communication, and lastly, appointing a devil's advocate. Stage 5. Outcomes. Functional outcomes from conflict. The first one is increased group performance, improved quality of decisions, stimulation of creativity and innovation, creation of an environment for self-evaluation. Second one is creating functional conflict. It reward it reward decent and punish conflict avoiders. For the dysfunctional outcomes from conflict are the following: development of discontent, retarded communication, and lastly, reduced group cohesiveness.
Negotiation. Negotiation is a process in which two or more parties exchange goods or services and attempt to agree upon the exchange rate for them. Negotiation is an open process for two parties to find a satisfactory solution to a complex conflict. Still negotiation. All negotiations share four common characteristics. First, the parties involved are somehow interdependent. Second, the parties are each looking to achieve for the best possible result in the interaction for themselves. Third, the parties are motivated and capable of influencing one another. And lastly, the parties believe they can reach an agreement. Types of negotiation. There are two basic types of negotiation: distributive and integrative. Distributive negotiation or distributive bargaining is a win-lose bargaining. Anything one party's gain in the deal is lost by the other party. There can be a winner and a loser, and parties are usually opposing each other. That is the goal of one party are in fundamental direct conflict with those of the other parties. Example of this is you go to a supermarket and buy some products, you won't be able to bargain because they have a fixed price. Either you can buy the product or leave it. In integrative negotiation, integrative bargaining is often described as the win-win approach. Both parties try to reach a settlement that benefits both. It involves the parties in a collaborative effort to jointly meet each other's needs and satisfy mutual interests rather than moving from the position to counter position to a compromise settlement. Example of this is a future vendors says the price they offer for a company chair is 5,000 pesos, but the customer says the highest they will pay is 4,500. The client and the vendors agrees to the 4,500 and they both make a deal. Types of negotiation. Characteristic is distributive and integrative. Outcome of distributive is win-lose while the integrative is win-win. Motivation. Distributive has individual gain while the integrative has individual and mutual gain. Interest. Distributive has opposed and integrative is different. Relationship. Distributive has short-term while integrative has short or long-term. Issues involved. Distributive has single while integrative has multiple. The negotiation process begins in preparation and planning, definition of ground rules, clarification and justification, bargaining and problem solving, and lastly closure and implementation. BATNA. The best alternative to a negotiated agreement, the lowest acceptable value or outcome to an individual for a negotiated agreement. Preparation and planning. Before the start of negotiation, one must be aware of conflict, to the history leading to the negotiation, the people involved and their perception of the conflict, expectation from the negotiation, etc. Definition and ground rules. Once the planning and strategy is developed, one has to begin defining the ground rules and procedures with the other party over negotiation itself that will do the negotiation. Clarification and justification. When initial positions have been exchanged, both parties will explain, amplify, clarify, bolster, and justify their original demands. Bargaining and problem solving. The essence of negotiation process is the actual give and take in trying to hash out an agreement. It is here where consensus will undoubtedly need to be made by both parties. Closure and implementation. Once an agreement has been met, this is the stage in which procedures need to be developed to implement and monitor the terms of the agreement.
Issues in negotiation. Part 1. Personality. Positive moods positively affects negotiation. Personality should neither help nor hinder the negotiation process. Issues in negotiation. Part 2. Gender. Men and women don't necessarily negotiate differently. There are stereotypes in negotiation, and some of them are: men tend to emphasize objective facts, while women focus more on the maintenance of the relationships. Men act dominant and authoritative, while women are passive and submissive. Men negotiate slightly better outcomes than women do in the same situations. Because men utilize more direct language, while women often reveal tentative and differential speech patterns. Issues in negotiation. Part 3. Cultural differences. Negotiation styles vary across cultures, and it's helpful to keep in mind cultural differences when engaging in negotiation. Culture profoundly influences how people think, communicate, and behave. It also affects the kinds of transactions they make and the way they negotiate them. And lastly, unethical negotiations. Selective disclosure, misrepresentation, deception and lying, false threats and false promises, inflicting direct or indirect harm. Third-party negotiators. There are 4 basic third-party negotiator roles: arbitrator, conciliator, consultant, and mediator. The arbitrators. Arbitrators is a third party with the authority to dictate agreement. Arbitration can be voluntary or forced on the parties of a negotiation by law or contract. An example of an arbitration would be when 2 people who are divorcing cannot agree on terms and allow a third party to come in and to help them negotiate. Conciliators. Conciliators is a trusted third party who provides communication between the negotiating parties. Some cases that conciliators are needed are disciplinary cases, grading issues, disputes arising from proposed changes to the way work is done. The mediators. Mediators is a neutral third party who helps facilitate a negotiated solution by using reasoning, persuasion, and suggestions for alternatives. Mediation may be appropriate when parties are having difficulties resolving the dispute because of lack of conflict resolution skills, or because of resistance to confronting or being confronted by the other party. The consultant. Consultant is a third-party negotiator who is skilled in conflict management and can add his knowledge and skill to the mix to help the negotiating parties arrive at a conclusion.